folks. Welcome to the November edition of Brown Bagging It from Your Backyard. This is an initiative as part of our Nature in My Backyard initiative, which is sponsored by the Audubon Society of Greater Cleveland and Shaker Lakes Garden Club and the Master Gardeners of Cuyahoga County. And I'm your host, Harvey Webster, and just a retired guy, but enjoy being part of this initiative. We bring these to you monthly, as you probably know. I'll just give a plug out. We have some hotshot speaker in December. That would be me talking about Wild About Winter. That's on December 10th. And we'll just explore a little bit about you're creating all these native wildlife havens in your yard. What could you be looking for? And what's actually happening around the time of the winter solstice, because it's a great ecological and physiological reset button in nature. It's a cool time. So we'll explore that. That's on the 10th. Lots of cool things are happening. We always encourage you to go to natureinmybackyard.clevelandaudubon.org for all the updates on what's happening in Nature in My Backyard, as well as all the cool stuff the Audubon Society of Greater Cleveland is up to. But today we've got a great program. We have Nathan Johnson, who's going to be talking about at home with native nut trees. So Nathan happens to be the senior attorney for land and water for the Ohio Environmental Council. And as such, he focuses on administrative agency actions that impact our public lands and waterways. He advocates and litigates for the protection of special places, increased access to public lands, and clean water for people and wildlife. And if you're not familiar with the OEC, its mission is to secure healthy air, land, and water for all who call Ohio home. The OEC is Ohio's leading advocate for fresh air, clean water, and sustainable land use. And it has a 50-plus year history of innovation, pragmatism, that's a great line, and success, using legislative initiatives, legal action, scientific principles, and statewide partnerships. The OEC secures a healthier environment for Ohio's families and communities. Nathan, his background, he got his law degree from the University of Virginia School of Law and a dual BA in history and philosophy from Denison University right here in Ohio. And he's admitted to the Ohio Bar, the Federal District Court for the Southern District of Ohio, and the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals. He resides in the Columbus area with his wife, 2 kids, and numerous pets. And he enjoys an aquarium hobby, going on outdoor adventures with his family, and gardening. And today he's going to be talking about native nut trees, hickories, oaks, hazelnuts, some of your favorite things if you happen to be a native lepidopteran bird or mammal, but also the human relationship and history of these native nut-bearing megaflora runs deep as well for many good reasons. So Nathan's going to take us on a multi-layered exploration of some of the best native nut trees a backyard could possibly have. So welcome, Nathan, and take it away.
Thank you, Harvey. It's great to be on the program today, and really excited. Let me see if I can share my screen here. I get the presentation going. Okay. There we go. Yeah. Okay. Can folks see this all right? Wonderful. Okay. Yeah, and thank you for the introduction. Like Harvey said, I'm an attorney, but a lot of what I'll be covering today, I don't know that it has much to do with legal practice. Although I will say I'm honored and fortunate to be in a position where I can litigate on behalf of the environment at times, including trees, and we've had some success at OEC with that over the years. But with that said, this is more, I would say, of a personal hobby, the gardening side of things. I'm very fond of the woody perennials in particular, and especially the nut trees. So this is really an indulgence. So I thank you for the opportunity. This will be fairly wide ranging, and hopefully folks will leave with some additional sense of some of the opportunities and possibilities for native nut trees. I'll get into shrubs a little bit too, but some really amazing options out there if folks are looking for something new to plant in their yards or to take care of something that's already there. Right here, I'll show you this picture that we're starting out with. is really fascinating. This is pecan. This is an Ohio native pecan. We are really on the edge of the range. I know it's pretty rare to think of, or most people probably don't think of pecans as Ohio natives. But yeah, we're on the very edge of the range. They go up, we'll see on the map, but they go up through the Mississippi Valley and a little bit into Ohio. So you can find them around, especially the Ohio River Valley. This is actually the Lucas pecan. So it's a named cultivar from Ohio. I think it was Grafton, Ohio, maybe around the Cincinnati area discovered. I think it was 1965. A really excellent option for folks if they're looking for a native pecan. Because, well, one, I think with pecans, it's really important to have climactics and especially with the ripening season. There are a number of pecans from southern areas, even Texas, that could do well just in terms of living in Ohio. But if you want to get a good fruiting, a good maturation of the nuts such that they're edible, you really do need to focus on those ultra northern pecan varieties. Lucas is excellent because it ripens early, so it can do really well in Ohio. I don't have one that's fruiting yet. I do have one, however, so hopefully someday soon I'll find out. But supposed to be great tasting, and a really excellent tree as well for home orchard culture because unlike most pecan trees, this one's supposed to be quite small and willowy. So it's sort of an excellent, ideal home orchard or home option. Still probably a fairly large tree, just not as large as your typical pecan trees. So throughout this presentation, I'll be touching not just on the biology, but some of the culture and cultural background as well. And I love the theme of this program, bringing nature into our backyards. And I think one of the things that really resonates with me, and I think, at least for me, I find it more so in some of the plants we'll be talking about today, is some of these trees and shrubs are just so wonderful for wildlife, some of the absolute best for wildlife, but also for human beings on so many levels. And it's no surprise there's a long and very rich history of human culture with many of these species. So I'd like to touch on a little bit of those. And just as a taste, here's a fun one. The old English word for tree and truth or true, it was the same word. They've got the same root. Trio meant tree and true back in the day, several hundred years ago. That's a fun little one to throw out there. And I think metaphorically we can see some of the meaning there. Firm, steady. It's just a really fun one that we don't necessarily think about all the time. Coincidentally, false etymologically comes from the actual falling, probably from a tree falling. So it's fun how much of our language is rooted in nature. So the species we'll be talking about, we already touched briefly on pecans. We'll be within the order Phagales. And so today we're talking about pecans, hickories, oaks, and hazelnuts. Let's see, there's also chestnuts are part of the order as well. Won't cover them today, unfortunately, as we probably are aware, they got essentially wiped out about 100 years ago, but one of the absolute premier species of North America, an important one in Ohio too, but won't cover those ones today. The order Phagales, this is a nice picture. This is I'm in Columbus, Ohio, but this is a nice picture of a really great, beautiful old white oak, radiant white oak, paired with also a very old shagbark hickory. They tend to like to co-occur. Really beautiful trees. It'll take a while to get them quite that large in your backyard, but no better time to start than now, huh? So let's jump off with hazels. They're really, I think, probably my favorite plant. And indulge me here a little bit. We're going to keep it native, but I do want to at least briefly mention the primary European variety, just because of the cultural background. and also because you see it a lot today growing in the States as well. But the primary native variety, we've got two. There's another one, but I don't know that you natively see it in Ohio. It's more northern Canada and west. That's the cornuta or the beaked hazel. But the primary species that we do see throughout Ohio and much of the east is the Corylus americana, or the common American hazelnut hazel, a really great species. The primary species that you find commercially is the European Corylus avellana in Europe. They're somewhat similar. The European variety tends to be larger, but I think I'll set that one aside now and just dial into the native. It's really just such an amazing species. I can't sing its praises enough. I think as gardeners and folks who are really into nature, we're probably all aware of how terrible a lot of the non-native invasive species are, especially the woody perennials, the shrubs. They're just so invasive and really take over. I think I'm soapboxing here a little bit, but there's such a need for a recovery of native thickets. And to me, one of the absolute best options, if you're popping out some really terrible autumn olive or something else similar, and you want to replace it with something along the fence line or wherever, you can't go wrong with hazelnut. It's just remarkable. Here's some pictures of the leaves. Really easy to pick out once you get to know the plant a little bit if you're out. In the woods natively, if you're just in a naturalized area, they're a little bit inconspicuous because they tend to be a little leggy and not very big. They look a little sad, honestly. I think they're usually just kind of holding on, waiting for an opening to happen. That's where they really thrive, is in openings. I think there's a lot of history with the species in beavers and human beings too. They really thrive where there's been some sort of disturbance. They get a lot of light, and they can really take over rapidly. In fact, there's a lot of scientific research out there showing that in, I think, North America and Europe as well, after the glaciation, hazels really dominated for a long time, up until some of the oaks and other species made their way back up to recolonize. Here, this is a really fabulous set of pictures. I just can't get enough of the species. So sorry. Hopefully folks are similarly interested in these things. But this is the growth of the nuts in summer, and they're just so beautiful. These are called involucres. They're these little coverings that I'm not sure what all the functions are that they provide, but I think they provide some sort of protection to the nuts as they're maturing, maybe providing them with energy as well. But they're just so beautiful. When you see this sort of thing, you know it's a hazel. This is just a characteristic. I'm not aware of any other species or genus that has this kind of characteristics. Really great. And throughout the summer, going into fall, you can see this a little bit here, but you can really tell when they're ripening and when they're ripe by the color. Like I said, it's a little hard to tell here, but when they're ripe, you can see they're get sort of a brown color. On the involucre, it gets kind of an orange glow to it, really inviting. And here's just a sense of what the shrub looks like. I would class it as a shrub to tree. It varies by individual. I would say typically we're talking about 4 feet tall to 12, 15, 20 even. It's a suckering plant, largely the native American variety is. So it's going to be multi-stemmed. You can manipulate them to your heart's content. Make a great hedge, shrub, whatever you want. Here's an example of one that's just kind of let loose to do its thing. They can get quite large, grow pretty quickly too. Here's another one that's a bit more moderate in size. Here's some pictures of the nuts. And again, there's just so much visual appeal with this plant. So I want to make sure we're bringing that out a little bit. You can see I think one of the great things about the nuts is they're pretty easy to crack, unlike a lot of things like walnuts. Hickories can be really difficult to extract the nuts. It's actually quite easy with hazelnuts. And one thing too, and I know, most folks have had hazelnuts in one form or another. I have to tell you though, if you've never grown hazelnuts in your yard, as you might imagine, I've got quite a few, but the taste is just phenomenal. A fresh hazelnut has sort of a phytochemical essence to it. It takes any hazelnut flavoring you may have had in coffee or whatever it may be and just completely blows it out of the water. It's hard to describe, but it's just really special. And you can't get that in the store. So another reason to take a stab at growing them in your backyard. Here is just a picture of some of the nuts. The native nuts tend to be a good deal smaller than the commercial varieties, which again, most of those are from Europe. But that said, you can still get some pretty good sized ones. You can kind of see here, there's sort of like a light brown covering on the nut. It's slightly bitter, but that comes off extremely easily. Just rub it in your fingers. Within a second or two, it'll be gone. You can eat it with this little film or not, but if you don't want any bitterness, just rub it off really quickly. Hey, another reason, and oh my gosh, the wonders of this plant just never cease. The fall colors of the natives are just absolutely incredible. And can't stress this enough either. Now having been around so many different individuals, each one's a little different. Each one has its own little personality in terms of how it grows and what it looks like and what the nuts are like and the involucres and when they ripen and all these things, and color too. I'd say they vary a little bit, at least in my experience. That said, pretty consistently, they've just got amazing fall colors. There's just sort of a glow, almost a rainbow hue of purples and reds and oranges, yellows. Just really phenomenal. Some of the best that I've seen. I will say too, this is definitely an area they're far superior to the non-native European varieties. Those tend to be pretty drab in the fall. You might get some yellow, but it's really not much of a show. Native hazelnuts, you'll get a great show in most years. This is the flowers too, in terms of multi-seasonal interest. Again, the aesthetics are just really special. You've got male catkins. It's in the birch family. Male catkins will hang most of the year. You can see them in some form or another, but especially in winter when things are really drab, there's not much going on. They can put on quite the show. They really stick out. They'll hang around, and then maybe for about a month or so, when they fully open, they're just really bright, glorious yellow. Can really be something. The female flowers are really beautiful. They're tiny though. You have to go looking for them. You can find them. They're just almost looks like a really small, in some ways, witch hazel flower, I suppose. But just really, this picture is maybe not the best representation. Some extremely bright, brilliant pink colors you can find out there, which again is really special in the winter when everything's white or drab. These are wind pollinated, by the way. So if you do plant there are a few that are self-fertile, but ideally you definitely want to plant multiple individuals in relatively close proximity, and then you should be in business with some nuts. This is just circling back to the cultural side of things. Really fascinating. Celtic culture in particular has a lot of material, surviving material anyway, on hazelnuts. It was a big part of culture, going back to the central, folklore of Finn McCool, and the salmon of knowledge. There was a sacred well with 9 hazelnuts growing around it, and essentially, the knowledge of the universe was contained in the hazels, the salmon ate it, and it continues. It's worth looking up and looking into. It's pretty fascinating. But just thought I'd share that it's a plant that's been historically, culturally associated with wisdom knowledge and many other things as well. One thing I'll mention too to look out for as a home grower, whether it's just a naturalized setup once going with, or an orchard where you're intentional about wanting to get a crop for your family or yourself, in addition to the wildlife. One thing to watch out for is Eastern filbert blight. That is something that the natives are largely immune to or highly resistant. So if you're going native, you really shouldn't have much problem, really any problem. I have seen some natives with some of it, but for the most part, it's not a real problem. That said, the European commercial cultivars just tend to get absolutely annihilated by this stuff. And in fact, there's a lot of effort to hybridize the species, in part because of this. Actually, the American hazelnut commercial industry is largely out in Oregon, where they've avoided this. But yeah, it's the sort of thing, if you do plant a lot of Europeans for whatever reason, probably within 10, 15 years, unless you've gotten some sort of hybrid that's been developed in recent times, you should expect them to get wiped out by this pretty terrible disease. Again, just touching back on some of the cultural dimensions, bringing humanity back into nature, such a long history of people and cultures with this species, widely used in the British Isles for fence making. You can see an example here. It's a coppice plant. You can see there's a coppice. I think these look more like the European variety, just because they're a bit bigger. But I do want to just highlight the fact that in terms of the usability and the manageability, if you will, one of the really amazing things about the species is that it's ideal for coppice. I mean, it really is the quintessential coppice plant. So basically, long story short, you can cut it down to the ground every few years and it will grow back very rapidly. So it's an endless source of wood. In fact, and it's great for fires, charcoal, fence making, that sort of thing. I don't know that it has as much modern day application as it used to, but still can be a very useful way to sequester carbon, certainly. One of the really fascinating things about the plant is the lifespan is, well, I'll put it this way. If you coppice the plant, the crown of the plant will live for thousands of years. I mean, it's virtually immortal. One of those rare species where if you just keep coppicing it on a 10, 15-year rotation, which is recommended for nut production anyways. I mean, it can outlive civilizations. It has. That's really fascinating. Was there anything else about this one I wanted to say? Oh yeah, before we jump into the oaks, the metaphor I think about with hazelnuts, let me go back to some fun pictures here, is, to me, it's like the plant equivalent of a chicken. It's just sort of that species that humans and hazels were meant to be together. And I know it sounds weird, but part of it is just the delight in the aesthetics of it. And again, some of that is just something that has to be experienced directly, but it's so incredible because unlike pretty much any other nut tree I'm aware of, it produces so rapidly. You could get, a stick, a twig, a really small transplant, plant it, and then they grow so rapidly and set nuts so quickly. It just depends, but 3 years, 4, 5, 6 years, and you can have your first crop. I mean, that's absolutely unheard of. If you're planting an oak tree or a hickory tree, I mean, it could be 40 years or more before you start to get something. This is, as close as you can get to being immediate, which is really something with nut production. Another thing that really recommends it. That also lends it to breeding as well, selectivity. You can really determine, like I said, there's a lot of personality, I would say, individuality. Some of these will have tons of hazelnuts on them, larger ones, So you can kind of pick and choose which one. Certainly, if you're going to spend a couple of decades with these things, you could really kind of develop your own cultivars, I'm sure, that sort of thing. So the possibilities are endless. It's just a really fabulous tree. Not to mention the taste is amazing, and the health benefits as well. It's high in oleic acid and other, I think, really high in vitamin E. I think it's been said, don't quote me on this one, but I've heard that per acre, it's probably, you could, in theory, grow hazelnuts and generate enough energy per acre to rival corn. So really, in theory, I know permacultural enthusiasts have a lot of love for this one. Really, hopefully, has a bigger place in the future. It's really marginal at this point, but had a much more robust place in the human sphere, and it really deserves our love and attention. And you can't go wrong if you bring it to your yard. So let's transition to another genus here. This is the oaks, and I'll hit on two species in particular that are really excellent native species: the white oak, Quercus alba, and the bur oak, or Quercus macrocarpa. Macrocarpa, essentially meaning large nut. It's the largest of the acorns. Really also amazing species. So you can see the range maps there. This is the famous white oak in Logan, Ohio. It's supposed to be 600 or so years old. That's one example of it there. Well worth visiting if you're down in Southeast Ohio. Pretty easy to get to in Logan. Just a great tree. I actually have a seedling of it growing in my yard. I think there's a nursery down there that sells them, if folks are interested. Here's a bit more of the cultural angle. This is a bit more modern than the ancient Celtic stuff I was sharing, but just some great quotes. I'll read through them. If oak is the king of trees, then the white oak is the king of kings. It's the standard by which all other oaks are measured. The majesty of a mature tree warrants pause for reflection. An outstanding tree among all trees, and I couldn't agree more. So the white oak, and I'm showing some really exceptional specimens. It's the sort of thing that if you've got a really small yard, maybe it's not ideal. And hey, it's going to take a couple of 100 years to get this impressive, right? So there's that as well. But yeah, if you've got a medium-sized yard, or the right location, even if it's a small yard, it can be a really great addition, highly adaptable. They thrive everywhere in Ohio. You don't want them in super wet areas. There's a swamp white oak, which is closely related, that does quite well in wetter areas too. This is actually, the tree on the left, it's the white oak. That's actually the largest white oak in the county in Pennsylvania I grew up in, for what it's worth. Really gorgeous. This other one, I think it might have been the champion white oak in Maryland. I'm not sure if it's still standing, but you can see the reason I included it. I don't know if you can see there's a lightning scar going down the middle. These white oaks are so resilient. And it's just, it's built into their DNA. Like I said, they can live 600 or more years. They're excellent at closing off wounds, watertight. This is where, shipbuilding, British Navy, American Navy was coming from, essentially the sister species in Europe, which actually originated in North America. I think we've discovered that pretty recently, that the English oak actually came from North American white oaks, or predecessor, maybe only about 5-10 million years ago. I say only. Oaks have been around since approximately 56 million years ago. But yeah, the white oaks are really incredible. Bourbon comes from American white oak. It's a really special tree. This one, I have not visited this one. This is a really gnarly, great example of how huge these things can get. This is up by Cleveland. So for folks on the call who are in the area, I think it's in a metro park somewhere. I'm sure we could find the location. Gosh, I'd love to go see it, but they're out there. They're out there in Ohio. Some of these huge monsters that were spared the saw. Wow, it's just truly amazing. Um, Again, bit of the culture and the local native ecology. It's an illustration of a lot of passenger pigeons, excuse me, that were so thick on the branch of a white oak, one of their favorite trees, that the branch is falling down. But yeah, what another iconic species. Ohio was the absolute heart of their breeding range. They fed on beech nuts and oak, in particular white oak. And it was a loss of those forests that drove their extinction, hunting as well. But just an incredible species. There's a story. I know I'm getting kind of anecdotal here, but hey, I don't know if I've got it on my phone. I can pull it up, but uh, you can look it up. You can find it online. There's a story from the Ohio State House. I think the year was 1855, and it was a news report, and it was just mayhem. People were totally freaked out. Downtown Columbus. Suddenly, the sky got like dark, almost black. People were crying and screaming and falling down on their knees. They thought it was the end of the world. It was actually, it was just billions of passenger pigeons flying over the downtown. And it's funny too, because, well, obviously it wasn't the end of the world, but the entire state house, all the people, the article ends basically once it was over, everything was covered in white bird poop. Kind of a funny story, but it's in the historical record. Sadly, that species is gone, but we can really keep on that natural legacy by planting these trees. And I think, folks on the call probably aware that oaks as a genus support more lepidopterans than any other genus out there. Hazels are really good too. I think so. Oaks are at what? I think as a genus, 435 or so. Moth and butterfly caterpillar species. I think the hazels around 130, which is pretty good. Let's see. The hickories, which we'll touch on, are good too. I think they're in the 200s. Don't quote me on that, but really phenomenal for mammals with the nuts, but birds and insects as well, of course. Let's see. No, this is just, again, forgive me, an English oak. Just again, just to show how incredibly beautiful these things can get. It's such a shame that they're largely lost from the landscape in this size. Here's an example. This is a really great white oak on the Wayne National Forest. And I include it in part just to show, again, with the white oaks, their individual variety can really be seen in the bark too. They tend to have, once they get a certain level of maturity, they have some really flaky characteristics. This one I would say is a bit more flaky than your average white oak, but they all tend to have something like that. It's really, really excellent habitat for Indiana bats and endangered bat species, other bats too, much like the shagbark and shellbark hickories, which we'll get to. So just another added benefit is that habitat value. I should say too, I know probably not what a lot of folks are looking for in their backyard, and they're extirpated from Ohio anyway, but white oaks are the most important species for black bear reproduction and survival in the Appalachians, largely because of the food crop really is directly tied to how many basically lactation and baby bear numbers and survival rates. Mother bears too, black bears prefer to den high up in hollow oak trees. Again, I don't know if folks want bear in their backyard, but it's just another iconic species that really pairs well with this tree species. So I thought I'd mention it. The photo on the right is a bit more, I think, sensible for one's backyard. This is a bur oak. I know I haven't spoken about them quite as much. Closely related to the white oak. And in fact, something I didn't mention is oaks, certainly within their families, we've got the red oaks in North America and the white oaks. they don't hybridize, but within their families. So the white oaks readily hybridize. And that's maybe, I think that's thought to be part of their success over the eons. It's just how readily they hybridize. It can be difficult to kind of disaggregate them. They're just so diverse in terms of their DNA pool. I mean, we have a handful of species in Ohio, but that said, yeah, bur oaks, white oaks regularly will hybridize. This guy right here, this is a named cultivar. Really rare to find named cultivars that are food trees that are oaks. You can find quite a few that are, ornamental cultivars. This one, though, it was just a straight wild that was discovered. I think this is from Illinois. This is the Ashworth bur oak. And what makes it unique is that its acorns have virtually no tannin. So they're really pretty sweet and not bitter, hardly bitter at all, straight off the tree, which you just don't find that with oaks. That's in terms of, a human food crop. Obviously, they're amazing for wildlife, but you can definitely make all kinds of breads, flours. It's very low glycemic, very healthy. It was a staple of a lot of Native American cultures and early European cultures. The rub, though, is that there's so much tannin content in most of them, it just is absolutely dreadful to eat fresh off the tree. You have to go through a leaching and or boiling process to get those tannins out. But there are some select cultivars, some really, it's a 1 in a million tree, basically. This is one of them. I have one in my backyard. It's a really nice tree, and you can get it. There's a really, I'll put a plug in here, Grimo Nut Nursery. They're up in, I think, Ontario, but I mentioned them. They have a lot of stuff, but they have a lot of Ohio native and Midwest native nut trees that are, I think straight seed, but also some really excellent cultivars. I think this is the only place I could find this Ashworth, but it's a nice one, worth considering if you want not just a straight species, but that cultivar that, hey, maybe you want to nibble on too. I think because I know I have a tendency to ramble, so forgive me, but because I believe it's got to be actually a graft that it will produce pretty quickly on. I know I mentioned that nut trees take forever to produce, and that's true. But if you get a decent sized graft, they're going to produce just because that's how it works. That and I have had some nuts. I've only had this tree for a few years. I've had a few nuts, at least enough to taste them. So anyway, so those were some of the oaks. Again, just a couple of examples. Some of the really fabulous species, the white oak, Quercus alba, and the bur oak. But let's get into the hickories. And again, this is all in the same order. And wow, I think we've got 6 hickory species in Ohio. These are probably the 2 quote unquote flagship species insofar as, humans enjoying them for their nuts anyway. That would be the shellbark. You can see the range. The range of the shellbark's on the left. The shagbark is on the right. Very similar trees. If you see them out in the wild, it can be hard to distinguish them. They have really amazing flaky bark, kind of like the white oak that I showed, only, even more intense. Probably the best habitat for some of these bat species. And really the main, I would say some of the main distinguishing characteristics, even though they're very similar, is the shellbark tends to be more of a lowland species. It's more well adapted to wetter environments. The shagbark you tend to find more up on slopes and drier areas, but the shagbark's really adaptable. Let's see, this is an excellent shellbark hickory. You can see this bark is just phenomenal. It's got so much visual interest, so much habitat value. And yeah, shagbark hickory, you could put it side by side, and I think usually maybe there are others who can tell the difference, but just going by the bark, I have a real hard time distinguishing them, excuse me. The nuts, you can tell the difference usually. This is the shellbark. It's also called the king nut. It's got the largest nuts of the hickories. This is, that's actually the husk. It's really thick. The nuts are big too, but it's really, when you see a big round globular husk like that, that's a good indication that it's a shell bark as well. I've included a couple of photos here. So again, this is from the nursery I mentioned. You can find some of these at a handful of nurseries. Grimo is, like I said, a really good one. Yoder that is a shagbark hickory. That is from Ohio. Trying to remember, I think it was discovered in 1918, if memory serves. And the reason I'm mentioning cultivars is with some of these trees anyway, is that at least certainly with hickories, the nuts are very comparable to pecans. I would say even better. They often tend to be more mapley and sweeter. Just a really amazing treat. The problem though is, I mean, unless if you have all the time in the world and just want to sit around all day and crack the nuts and use a little pick to kind of scrape little bits out, that's usually what you're stuck with hickories. Their nuts are so thick, the shells rather are so thick, and it's so hard to extract the little pieces. It's just, for most people, it's not going to be worth it. And that's a real shame in the sense, at least so far as, that added dimension of human cuisine, I guess, if we want to put it that way. But there are a handful of individuals, again, it's sort of like the 1 in a million trees someone found out in the wild or on a farm that just happened to be growing. Yoder is one of those, and it's basically the shell is really thin, or at least really thin for a hickory, and usually the nut cavity is like totally open. So it's much like a pecan, and pecans and hickories are very closely related. They're from the let's see, well, they're from the same genus. It's basically walnuts, hickories, pecans. All, of course, related to oaks and hazels too, further back on the evolutionary chain. But wow, yeah, it's almost like an English walnut. The thinner shell, it's just all nut inside. Those are extremely rare to find, and this is not, GMO or anything. These are just kind of those, again, 1 in a million trees. The other one, I included Yoder because it's from Ohio. I think there are a number of them out there, and it's not. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I mean, there aren't a million of these, known hickory cultivars, but I don't know. At least from my limited research, maybe 20, 30 that you can commonly find out there. So there are certainly options. It's well worth looking and just kind of investigating. Sometimes you can find information about ripening and size of the tree and other characteristics of the nuts. So if you really want to dial into what you're looking for, it's definitely worth doing the research. This Eder, I think this may be from Ohio. I found some information saying it was. This is actually a hybrid. The pecans and sorry, my hickories, sorry, the Hicon, hickories and pecans hybridize readily as well. This is another example. I mean, you can see it almost looks like a blend between a walnut and a pecan. This one, I think the description on the website says it's the size of a chicken egg, and the shell is roughly that thick too. So again, if I were a Native American and, spending all day trying to get tiny shards of hickory out of a shell, and I found this, wow, that'd be a tree I'd probably, I don't know, live with for the rest of my life. That'd be really special. Anyway, so pecans, getting close to pecan pie season. I guess we're in it right now. And again, yeah, I know I didn't realize that they were native to Ohio. They are. You can see there's the USGS map. That you can see there's just a little bit there. That's not fully accurate in that I know there are pecans out there further up in the Ohio River Valley, like up along the West Virginia border, even up closer to Pennsylvania. They're just, they're very rare, but they're out there. And I included 2 cultivars here. I think I started out chatting about these guys, but Lucas and Fisher, I actually planted a couple of these, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago or so. They're really taking off too, so I'm excited about that. But the Lucas is the Ohio native, and again, it's ideal. You have to be really careful with pecans. If you are doing pecans, I mean, you always could do just a straight seed from an ultra northern is usually what it's called. I think though with pecans, unlike these other species, if you want nuts for wildlife even, and yourself, you really probably do want to go with a cultivar just because it's so marginal in that sense that if you're not getting something that's very highly adapted, you're probably not going to have a long enough growing season. But these two work really well. Like I said, they're both also, from what I've heard, we'll see if I'm still around when these guys are bigger, I can report back. But supposedly they're ideal for orchard culture. They're on the smaller side for pecan trees. The Lucas is from Ohio. Fisher is from Illinois. Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, Ohio is where you're going to find those far northern pecans. But the other thing too to note with pecans, and this was similar with hazelnuts, is with hazels you definitely want two at least for pollination. All of these trees and shrubs I'm talking about are wind pollinated. Excuse me. It's even more involved with the pecans because they have I can't remember the name for it, but there's some terminology there. But you have to be really selective. Another reason I think maybe to go with cultivars. About the type of flowering they have. And there are words for that. I can't recall off the top of my head, but basically you want a compatible pair, or if you're doing an orchard with several, you want at least some compatibility. These two guys here are compatible in terms of when the male and female flowers are in bloom. That's essentially what it is factually. So that's just another thing to be aware of. I think that might, okay, yeah. I think that wraps it up essentially. I know we've covered a lot of ground and touched on some of these species, or well, all of the species we touched on are just really superior for wildlife, for human beings. If you like to eat, pecans, hazelnuts, oaks, they're interesting. I will say that the Ashworth, I can go back to that. I've tried acorns before, and wow, yeah, they're not very pleasant, at least absent going through the leaching process. But this one's really good. I'd say it's slightly sweet, and usually with the tannins, it's just overpowering. This one is just a tiny bit of spiciness, so it was really, really nice, I thought. Anyway, so think. I think that's that. I'm happy to see how much time we have. However, folks want to go with things, I'm happy to answer questions or just chat or however we want to proceed.
Well, thank you very much, Nathan. Fabulous program. I mean, you are truly a connoisseur of nut trees, and who know your passion for them is extraordinary. I love the fact you gave a shout out to the shellbark hickory because eagles are kind of in my background, and the Great Nest of Vermilion, Ohio, an eagle nest that was occupied from 1890 to 1925, was built in a shellbark hickory, and every year the eagles would add a new layer to it. And by the time it collapsed out of the tree, it was 12 feet tall, 8 feet across the top, and weighed an estimated 2.5 tons. And it
Wow.
was a tribute to that shellbark hickory that it could support it for as long as it did.
Wow. That's incredible. That's amazing.
So I got to ask you, I mean, you are so familiar with these, they all sound like family members.
Mm.
At your place, I mean, how big of a place do you have, and how much of it is devoted to these nut trees?
Yeah. And that's a great way to put it. I know not everyone feels this way, but for me, they really are kind of like family members. Once you get to know some of the species characteristics, it's almost like you suddenly see the trees and oh, I know what that is. I know, what its personality is like. But even the individuals, especially with hazelnuts, because there's so much variability, They really are almost like individual people in the plant sense. But more to your point, I don't have a lot of space, about a quarter acre, which is not too bad. I'm in Columbus here.
Mhm.
A decent amount of space, but some of it is that I'm in a neighborhood that has a lot of really mature canopy to start with. So we actually, not on my property, but right next door, there's a massive swamp white oak. There's a really great stand of hickories behind my place, but at my spot, yeah, I would say I can't even count how many hazels I've got. They're on the fence line, and I've got them in other places too. You don't need a lot of space for hazels, excuse me. With the oaks, I mean, long term, again, you want to plan in
Yeah.
advance because it takes a long time. Can get really spreading. Hickories tend to be more straight. They're not quite as spreading, so I think they're more forgiving in terms of space. Um, One thing I'll mention, and this goes from translating, nerding out and learning things from the page to having an orchard in one's backyard is, oh wow, and I should have mentioned this earlier, is the squirrels, which, there's little I like more than supporting wildlife, but I will say I'm a little bit bitter about the squirrels with the hazelnuts. Wow, the first several years, I would say, and like I said, 2, 3 years after we put in hazelnuts, we started getting nuts, and a couple of years we had hundreds of them. We have, I'm sure, thousands of hazelnuts every year. We'd be lucky to get one. The squirrels
Oh,
oh yeah, and good for them, but wow, couldn't you leave a few for us? But they just totally go after them. I've read that that's just something to be aware of. Temper expectations if you have squirrels. I have read, and I guess there's evidence saying that if you've got like 100 feet, and I know that can be difficult unless you've got a really big yard, 100 feet all around keeps the squirrels away. They're afraid of hawks and raptors, and the raptors tend to take care of them. But yeah, if you're close to a tree line, good luck. Maybe the first
yeah,
couple of years until they find them, but
got it. Cynthia asked the question, you mentioned wind pollination and the need for multiple trees for successful pollination. How different do the trees need to be?
yeah, that's a great question. I would say, and again, in my experience, at least with the hazels, I think if you're going native hazelnuts, I wouldn't worry about it too much. I mean, I would say go with at least 2 or 3. I don't think there's a lot, at least in my, it's anecdotal, right? But I have never had any troubles. They tend to bloom over a pretty long period of time. I think it's just you want to make sure they're relatively close by, maybe not on opposite sides of the house, that sort of thing. But yeah, I don't think you need to overthink it with hazelnuts. Oaks and hickories, usually there are so many in the area that it's not going to be a concern. And I know their pollen can travel miles and miles as well. If for some reason you think you're out with no hickories or oaks, maybe plant two, but it's I would imagine that's almost never going to be a concern. I think really the one that is a concern is the pecan, just because it is so marginal here. Of course, with climate change, maybe that'll be changing, but it's the sort of tree that you definitely would, I think, want to be very intentional about matching it up, at least having a pair. And again, that's not only because you want the climatically adapted varieties, but you want that flowering, the timing of the flowering as well.
So, with respect to those, since we here in northeastern Ohio, it's a little bit harsher climate than you've got there in mid-state. What do you think the success of those native cultivars, the pecans, or the
Mhm.
in the landscape up here in northeastern Ohio?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say experimentation is one of
Yeah,
the most fun things about gardening. I mean, I would say, I mean, albeit it's in the Mississippi Valley, but I mean, you can find them pretty far north. I think there are even some cultivars from southern Minnesota. So you know, I'm sure they get hit by some pretty intense winters. I think just going off the USDA zone chart, I've seen zone 5 for ultra northern. So I bet you they would survive. I think really, as long as it's ultra northern or northern adapted, it's really more so, are you actually going to get a crop? Because they need at least 180 days.
Right. Do you have the long enough growing season? Well,
Yeah,
close to the lake here,
yeah,
we do have,
yeah.
there's a moderating influence. Um, I got just question, how did this passion for nut trees and also doing the deep dive into sort of the history and the importance of these trees to humans? You clearly know your stuff. I'm just curious to know what drew you into that.
Yeah. Well, I'm a history nerd and a plant nerd, so I guess it was just a natural, naturally arrived at it. That's a great question, though. I think, I think it was just having a yard. It's been a while now, but getting that yard and, oh, what should I plant here, right? For some reason, I was just drawn to the hazelnuts. I think having the benefit of spending some time researching, and it just jumped out at me as, wow, there's just, I mean, every page or every facet is just so amazing about this plant, and I think that's really what started it for me. Really, is the hazelnut.
And here I thought, being a philosophy major, it was you were drawn to the truth, and
Oh
trees
yeah,
represent.
yeah. No, I didn't realize that until fairly recently, but oh yeah, that makes sense to me. Yeah.
Question about coppicing. So,
Mhm.
when you're talking about hazels, for instance, as maybe a hedge,
Yeah.
they're creating a hedge line. Would coppicing be a way of trying to foster a denser line of stems? Have you tried that?
I have I have coppiced. I would say, and again, they vary a little bit. The natives tend to sucker really well. So some of it just depends on what you're going for. I will say when you do coppice, their form changes. They become very straight, which, hey, if a few hundred years ago, if you're making a fence, that could be great. Aesthetically, it may not be as pleasing if you're good. It may or may not be. Um, I would, if you're going for a hedge, I don't know that I would recommend coppicing per se, more just pruning.
Mhm.
Um,
Okay,
yeah.
cool. Well, I don't see that there's any more questions. I want to just thank you for a really fascinating deep dive into nut trees. And you've got so much practical information, and you've touched on so many aspects of it, particularly the aesthetic aspect. I'm sure that you've inspired everybody to start now looking in catalogs and figuring out how they're going to source their nut trees
Yeah.
so that they can enjoyed the same fascination for hazels and other nut-bearing trees that you have. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Yeah, thank you, Harvey. Yeah, one more plug. Yeah, hazelnuts, great plant. They deserve a larger space in our lives and our landscapes. So look into it. Get some out there.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And see us next month on the 10th of December. And you'll be listening to me talking about wildlife and just life in general out in the wild around the time approaching the winter solstice. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you all next month. Take care. Bye-bye. Nathan, Peter Tuttle, Nathan Nust is left.
Oh, busy guy. Thank you, Harvey. That was great, right?
Oh my God, excellent. Great. I mean, the programs just keep getting better and better.